There are two words that might best tell the tale of polling by the end of this night. Two words that, if past history tells us anything, could turn celebratory rallies into funeral dirges. They are right in front of our face, yet those of us who don't live in the Granite State seem to avoid considering these like a snowstorm bringing 30 feet of snow or more. So let's get into specifics of those words. Let's welcome back the Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of New Hampshire, Director of the UNH Survey Center, co-author of The First Primary, New Hampshire's Outsize Role in Presidential Nominations, Andrew Smith. Professor, good to talk to you again. And I'm going to throw those two words at you right now, which nobody wants to talk about, which can change everything tonight. New Hampshire. Fair to say, because everybody thinks New Hampshire's like every place else, but this is one of the most unique places in the country when it comes to people and the way they cast votes.
It is, and I think the big reason is that in other primary contests or nomination contests, most people who vote are activists or people who are strongly partisan or strongly affiliated or tied to one candidate or the other. Here in New Hampshire, we have really high turnout. It's estimated to be a record this time, should be in the mid-50s. And that means the voters who are going to determine who wins here aren't activists by and large. They're just regular people. And for regular people who aren't that political, there's not much difference between, say, a Bernie Sanders or a Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side, or a Chris Christie or a Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or a John Kasich on the Republican side. They'll be happy with that, whichever candidate wins, and they'll be happy to change their mind on Election Day.
I had the great fortune to live in Boston for 4 years, got to know the people of New England, got to know a lot of friends of mine in New Hampshire. And when it came down to the primaries, they told me the thing that sets the Granite State apart is people here want you to come to the restaurants. They want you to come to the little coffee clutches. They want you to come and press the flesh and be close. Now, that all makes sense, and I think they were right. But Donald Trump doesn't do any of that, yet he is still leading by huge margins. Why the difference?
Well, I think that there's a little bit of a myth about the New Hampshire primary, and that is that the voters have to engage with the candidates here. There are activists that really want to engage with the candidates, and they feel that it's their birthright to do that. And they're the ones that demand they come to their houses and come out and talk with them and demand the right to ask them silly questions at every sort of rally or town hall across the state. But most voters really don't think that way. Most voters here are just regular folks who show up on Election Day and vote. But the activists are here.
But are they then, New Hampshireites, that is, the people who live there, are they then completely and totally different from everybody else in America? Because what you're talking about is it makes us seem that maybe America votes entirely differently than the people in New Hampshire. Maybe New Hampshire is so unique that we like to think that it sets a tone, but in many ways, maybe it doesn't for the rest of the country.
Well, it actually is. It is somewhat similar, and it's similar in some ways and dissimilar in others. I think on the Democratic side is a very liberal state. The Democratic electorate here is quite liberal. The Republican electorate is a moderate northeastern Republican electorate. But when you mention Donald Trump is a different phenomena, I think, than other candidates that we've seen in the past, in that he's a celebrity first and a candidate second.
Oh, okay, wait a minute. Say that right there. I want to jump on that. Professor, I want to jump on that, where you said celebrity first and candidate second. That's fascinating because most people that I knew in New Hampshire, they would always look at the candidate first. They're really political. They want to get into their political races. They want to understand the politics here. That would seem to be a complete disparity here for New Hampshireites who I wouldn't think would go for people just because they're celebrities.
Well, and then again, I would push back and say that voters here really aren't that much different than voters in other states. In fact, they are less political in the primary electorate than they are in most other states. And that's because turnout is so high. It's not activists that are determining who wins here. It's regular folks. The big difference between New Hampshire and other states is the campaign has been going on for a long time, and there's been a tremendous amount of money dumped into the campaign. And it's not that the voters here are any more discerning than voters in other states or more political than voters in other states. And that's why I think that you see a Donald Trump doing quite well here, because the voters here aren't much different than voters across the country. They respond to celebrity as well.
Let's talk about two things that candidates have done. Marco Rubio had what they're now calling the Mr. Roboto moment, where he spit out the exact same phrase over and over and over again. People believe that's going to hurt him horribly, and there's some numbers that seem to back that up. But then there's Donald Trump, who spits out a vulgarity last night, which is simply not presidential in any sense of the word. Which one do you think would be more of a negative to New Hampshire voters?
Definitely Rubio's. And it's not to say that Trump's comment yesterday isn't offensive to many New Hampshire voters, but already there's 35% or so who say they wouldn't vote for Donald Trump under any circumstance. He's not going to get their support no matter what he says. But however, a lot of the supporters that he has won't necessarily be offended by that comment. In fact, they might concur with that comment that he said, and it might be another example of their belief that Donald Trump is really telling it like it is, even if he uses vulgarities to describe that. So I don't think it will necessarily hurt him.
I got about 30 seconds left. Jeb Bush. His numbers have been rising in New Hampshire. People seem to be getting the message. But in your opinion, watching races, knowing the New Hampshire voter, do you think it's enough to save him?
I don't know if he can win it. I don't know if he can make up the difference that he has behind Trump. But the one thing that he has done, and John Kasich have done, frankly, is spent their money and time building an organization that identifies voters, works to get information to those voters, and is doing their best to get those people to show up on Election Day. If he's able to do that, he can do okay. He might be able to finish as high as second place here. I doubt that he'll have enough to get into first, but he could certainly finish in the second.
5 seconds, Professor. Have you voted today?
I voted last week because I've been here in Manchester since 6 o'clock this morning, and we'll get home at 3 tonight.
And I will not ask whom you voted for because, well, okay, I'll ask. Will you tell us?
No.
See, I didn't think so, but I thought I couldn't just let it pass just in case. I wanted to get it out there. Professor Andrew
Sure.
Smith, it's always a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you. Thanks so much. We'll talk again.
Great.
Don't forget, join us tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Pacific Time. All the coverage of the New Hampshire primary is right here on Newsmax, and the Hardline will continue.